Here now to discuss the year since the United States withdrew from Afghanistan is General David Petraeus. General Petraeus wrote a piece for The Atlantic recently criticizing how the withdrawal went and discussing what he believes the United States should have done. He is, of course, a retired U.S. Army general. He served as commander of U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan from 2010 to 2011. And you might recall, General Petraeus was also the CIA director from 2011 to 2012 under former President Obama. General Petraeus, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
So your piece is called Afghanistan Did Not Have to Turn Out This Way. So how did we get here?
Well, first of all, let me just clarify. It was not just about the decision to withdraw and the actual conduct of the withdrawal. This is really looking at our 20 years there and observing, for example, that we didn't even get the inputs right. In other words, the right number of forces, the right big ideas, strategic concept, the right organizational architecture, preparation of our forces, all the capabilities, the right number of diplomats, spies, development workers, and so forth. It took us 9 years just to do that because shortly after we invaded Afghanistan, which I believed was right, when the Taliban refused to expel al-Qaeda from their territory after the 9/11 attacks were planned in that sanctuary in Afghanistan, we had to go in. And then we did have to stay. All the people that say, well, you should have just gone in, toppled the government, expelled al-Qaeda, and then left, it would have gone into civil war again. So we had a responsibility to stay at that time, but we then quickly shifted our focus to Iraq, and we really didn't return a focus to Afghanistan for 7.5 or more years and didn't get the inputs right, as I said, until about 9 years in. And then we really started withdrawing pretty quickly thereafter. We recognized at some point that we couldn't win, and that I think that is correct. The conditions there are completely different from Iraq. The sanctuaries enjoyed by the Taliban and the Haqqani network and the other extremists and insurgent groups that were making life so difficult in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, prevented us really from getting at the root of the problem. But though we couldn't have won, we could have managed the problem. And my argument is that there were alternatives, even at the very end, that we didn't have to pursue this diplomatic accord under the previous administration that was arguably the worst in our diplomatic history. And even after that was done, the current administration really didn't have to withdraw. They reversed plenty of other decisions by the previous administration. They could have reversed this one as well. We could have kept 3,500 troops there, added to the number of drones. Yes, the Taliban would have been coming, but we're not on the front lines. At that point in time, we hadn't actually lost a soldier in combat for 1.5 years until the tragic, terrible suicide bombing at the international airport during that chaotic withdrawal, which was extraordinary in terms of just sheer logistics to pull out 120,000 people. But we should recognize that we left behind at least 160,000 of those who qualified for the special immigrant visa by being battlefield interpreters and their family members.
Yeah, and you point out in the article that the U.S. and its allies sort of missed a key window, which you sort of addressed, when the Taliban was weak. And, you know, the allies could have gone in and established a strong government, helped to establish a strong government, but they were distracted by other things happening around the world. And so come time to negotiate the U.S. troop withdrawal, suddenly we find ourselves negotiating with the Taliban and not with the Afghan government. And you describe this as sort of that it has to rank as among the worst diplomatic agreements to which the U.S. has ever been a party to. Can you expand on that?
Well, first of all, here we are negotiating with our enemy. Now, we sit down with our enemy all the time. We did this in Iraq, reconciliation and so forth. We've done it historically. We talked to the Soviet Union even at the height of the Cold War. But we didn't even have the Afghan government represented at the negotiating table over an agreement that dealt with that country. And that was a democratically elected government, however imperfect that election process may have been. And then we forced that Afghan government to release 5,000 Taliban detainees who went right back to helping the Taliban carry out that comprehensive offensive, simultaneous attacks around the country that ultimately brought the Afghan security forces to their knees because they knew nobody was coming to the rescue. The helicopters, all the maintenance and readiness degraded when we pulled out the contractors, a critical component of the Afghan security force capability. But again, the idea that we would force the government to do something to induce our enemy to accept what we wanted to do, which is what they wanted us to do, to withdraw, just sort of boggles my mind. And then, of course, there was an opportunity to ignore that, just as we ignored the withdrawal from or reversed the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord, the withdrawal from the World Health Organization, and a number of other actions taken by the previous government that this administration, I think in many cases rightly, has reversed. And to be fair, this administration has done a very impressive job, I think, in responding to the unprovoked Russian invasion of Ukraine. But on this issue, I clearly see it differently.
And General, let's talk about a path forward. In your piece, you argue that the United States needed to continue building up Afghanistan after occupying the country. What would that have looked like? What would the cost have been? Because, on one hand, it sounds like it was the right thing to do. It should have been the right thing to do. But as you know, clearly the American people, after 20-some years of war, were perhaps getting tired of this, what people call the never-ending war. So what would that have looked like? And is there an opportunity to do that now? You say that the United States talks to our enemies frequently. Is there a way to not freeze Afghanistan out of geopolitics? Because as you know, through your experience, that if you do that, that's how you end up with a terrorist like Osama bin Laden hiding out in the region.
Well, the problem is that this is a government that signed an agreement and said it would not allow sanctuary to Islamist extremists again. That's, after all, why we went there in the first place. And where did we find the emir of al-Qaeda? Downtown Kabul, walking distance from the presidential palace, in a safe house provided by the acting minister of interior of this current government in Afghanistan. And so they've made it very, very difficult. You had the piece that showed that they've also reneged on their commitments that they would allow girls to go to high school and women to go to college. That's obviously not been materialized in this case as well. So there are numerous problems here that make it very, very difficult for us to engage with the government, even though we do need to engage in some fashion because we don't want the entire country to starve. And we can do that through non-governmental organizations directly. But we also still feel a very substantial, or should feel a very substantial moral obligation to bring to the United States these well over 100,000 individuals who shared risk and hardship with our soldiers on the battlefield as battlefield interpreters, and who are qualified for the special immigrant visa that was created for this purpose, and their family members. And that we have not met that obligation either. Now, to come back to nation building, and a lot of people said, this is where it went wrong. We shouldn't have done nation building. Well, if you don't do nation building, to whom do you hand over the tasks that we're performing once we've taken over the country, essentially? We toppled the government, the Taliban, because they refused to expel al-Qaeda from their soil. We had to go in and do that. We now control the country. Yes, we quickly got together a transitional government and so forth. But the real point is that we squandered these early years, as you mentioned earlier, where there was very, very little violence. The truth is that in Afghanistan, the violence was never remotely as high as it was in Iraq. The problem was that we couldn't get to the source of the violence the way we could in Iraq during the surge in particular. So you could never really drive it down the way that we would have liked to. And therefore, what you could do at best was manage it, noting, again, yes, this Afghan government was far from perfect. It had incredible shortcomings. It was amazingly frustrating. There was corruption. There were all kinds of bureaucratic challenges and so forth. But surely, that was a government that was vastly better than what now controls Afghanistan today, has allowed al-Qaeda's leader to have sanctuary in Kabul, not even just in the country, and where you see the Islamic State, Khorasan group, the affiliate of the Islamic State in Afghanistan and Western Pakistan, carrying out very deadly attacks on a near daily basis. Yesterday alone, they hit 2 shrines, mosques in different locations and killed many dozens of largely innocent Afghans. So this is a very, very dangerous situation. We know that we have to keep a very close eye and pressure on the Islamist extremists in it so they can't manifest an international threat. And that's going to be the challenge. And again, the previous government, for all of its shortcomings, certainly was allied with us against the extremists and generally trying to offer the freedoms that we all hold dear. For example, women to have the opportunity to actually be in society, in the business world, visible on the streets, and of course, certainly to go to school all the way through college.
General, let me ask you about something else that I don't think you touched on in the Atlantic article, but forgive me if I'm wrong, because I've read a bunch of different things. But, as you know, Afghanistan is on the verge or in the middle of a humanitarian crisis. You talked about not wanting Afghans to sort of starve to death. There are billions of dollars in frozen funds. The lion's share of that money is being held here in the U.S. Most of it belongs to the Afghan government, but some of it, $500 million, $500 million, belongs to sort of private Afghan banks. We're talking about private citizens. What's your take on releasing this money so at the very least people can buy the food that they need?
Well, the challenge here is we actually were in discussions with them in one of the Central Asian states to the north of Afghanistan at the very time that we were also, it turns out, tracking the emir of al-Qaeda. And I mean, how can you release money directly to a government that has just done exactly what it pledged it would not do, and what it did the last time and forced us to intervene.
General, what about
so
with
that's
safeguards?
the predicament that it's put itself in that predicament by its actions, and it makes it very, very difficult for the current administration in the United States to even have regular discussions with them, given that obviously there is a complete lack of trust between our two governments.
But what
That's
about
a serious challenge.
What about with some sort of safeguards? And I don't know what they could be, whether some of that money goes directly to aid.
There are efforts to funnel funding through international organizations that we trust that work directly with the Afghan people. Because indeed, half of the Afghan people literally are on the verge of starving. 90% are malnourished. So you have a sense of how devastating the situation is for the Afghan people. The economy obviously is completely collapsed with the Western forces and embassies and so forth withdrawing. Extremism is back. Violence certainly is much lower in particularly the rural areas that were the most embattled during the time of the Taliban insurgency. But that is not particularly reassuring if you can't eat.
That's a good point. General, before we let you go, let me just ask you quickly about China. Beijing has reacted very strongly to recent visits to Taiwan by U.S. lawmakers, and Taiwan's defense ministry said today that it detected 51 Chinese military aircraft around the island. Should we be concerned? I wonder if the Chinese are looking at what's happening in Ukraine and what the United States response has been there, which is to send money and to send weapons, but no boots on the ground. What do you think that they're taking away from what is happening between Russia and Ukraine? And what do you think their aspirations ultimately, at least in the near term, are for Taiwan?
Well, the very stated policy of China, obviously, is to reunify in their terms. They want to do it peacefully. That is obviously proving problematic, to put it mildly. But let me point out that, of course, the withdrawal from Afghanistan and the way it was conducted allowed China to say, in fact, President Xi stated, see, that you cannot depend on the United States. So another case where a decision in one part of the world does have ramifications for another. You'll recall the red line that was not a red line some years back. That also had repercussions and echoes out in the Indo-Pacific region, as it's now termed. I would contend, however, that our response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine has sent a different message, and that is a very, very stiff message that the United States is pouring weapons and ammunition into the country that has been invaded, and it is imposing crushing sanctions on the Russian economy, its financial system, Putin's inner circle, and also its industry through the form of export controls that include no microchips going to Russia, which is preventing Russia's military-industrial complex from producing new tanks, armored fighting vehicles, and the like, all of which require some number of microchips. So I think that actually sends a very cautionary tale, a very cautionary message. I don't want to equate the situations. The Chinese economy is obviously vastly more important, vastly more integrated into the global economy, and really the greatest source of growth, even though it's a second economy in dollar terms to ours, but the greatest source of economic growth over the past decade or two. But again, I think that the message is one of caution, that these large operations are very, very hard, particularly if you've not really done combat in a long time in this fashion. And that indeed the world can respond very, very firmly to those kinds of actions.
General Petraeus, thank you so much for joining us. Despite the seriousness of the topic, you should know that your puppy in the background gave us all a reason to smile. He made a cameo, and he's very adorable.
She knows how to make an entrance.
She really does.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much.